are delighted to be here today. This is just such, for me, an exciting topic, but also a really timely topic for nonprofits, especially here in the US. People ask me all the time, well, when's the best time for us to really dive into our individual giving program? The answer to that is a lot like the answer to when is the best time to plant a tree? The best time to plant a tree was 30 years ago. The best time to start and cultivate your individual giving program was 30 years ago. But the second best time to plant a tree is today. And it's the same with your individual giving program. Now is the time to really hone in on those individual donors and start to cultivate and develop those relationships. I began my career in wealth management, as Roberta mentioned, and one of my first bosses said to me, look, to be a successful wealth manager, you only need to do three things. You need to talk to enough people, you need to talk to the right people, and you need to have something to talk about. He went on to say, our business is simple. It's not easy, but it's simple. What wealth management and fundraising have in common is that they're both asset raising businesses. We have to raise money in order to be successful, to be able to fulfill our role. So today we're going to walk through talking to enough people, the right people, and having something to talk about. And we're going to take those three elements in reverse. So let's start by having something to talk about. When you look at your donor marketing funnel, right, that donor pipeline funnel, that all communications, that direct marketing piece, that's where the magic happens. The reason is that that's the communication everyone sees. So whether you're acquiring a new donor or you're re-engaging an existing donor, you're reinforcing to your donors why they're part of what you do, why they believe in what you do, why what you do is so important, and why you are the only organization uniquely positioned to fulfill that goal. So when we bring people onto our file, they're going to filter down and become different types of donors if we do our jobs well. But at the very top, that message that everyone sees is critical to your success. We're going to focus on that today. Let's take a look at how people really do come onto your file. They find out about you in one of two ways. It could be they come to an event, they're invited by a friend or a relative, or someone tells them about the work you do. The other way is direct marketing. Maybe they Google homeless solutions in my area or anti-human trafficking in my area. And through that SEO search, they find out about you. Maybe they receive something in the mail if you do direct mail acquisition. Or maybe they see something on social. Regardless, the way to captivate people is through the way you tell your story. So that's why when we talk about engaging people in what we do, how we say what we do, what we actually tell people is key to the success of our fundraising efforts. When it comes to making buying decisions, people make buying decisions based on two factors: the stories told and the memories they leave behind. Now, you might say, well, Angela, nobody's buying anything. We're asking them to donate. Remember that you're asking people to do something with their money. So psychologically, it's very much the same type of decision as buying anything else. We're asking people to invest either their discretionary income or their investable assets in the work we do so that they can realize something, whether they're realizing personal satisfaction, maybe they get their name on the side of a building, public recognition, whatever it is that your donor is seeking to accomplish. They have to make that decision to make the investment, to part with their resources in order to become your partner. So let's start with having something to talk about. Christian, kick us off.
Yeah, thanks, Angie. So not only do we have to have something to talk about, but we have to talk about it in a way that actually captures people's attention. So it's important to understand how the human brain works to start. So our brain's core functions at a very basic level are survive and thrive and conserve calories. These are survival mechanisms that are designed to keep us alive, and it's how our brain is filtering information all day, every day. So this is important to keep in mind when we communicate. The way that we talk about the work we do should show people how we help them thrive, and it should communicate in a way that burns as few mental calories as possible. So you know the feeling of tuning out when someone is just talking on and on and on, and I hope you're not doing that right now, but we all know that feeling, right? That's your brain's survival mechanism, tuning out information that doesn't help you survive and thrive in order to not burn calories on something that's non-essential. And storytelling is a tool that we can use to overcome this. So storytelling has been used since the beginning of human history as a way for all of us to make sense of the world. And you might not know this, but believe it or not, we live in a really noisy world. Social media, advertising, billboards, TV, webinars, everything is competing for our attention. Storytelling is a tool that we can use to break through that noise and capture attention. Because when we tell a story, the human brain locks in. So, in their most basic form, a lot of human stories follow roughly the same 7 elements, and we can use those storytelling elements in our communications as nonprofit organizations. So, get your favorite movie in mind right now, and then see if it maps onto these elements. So, at a very basic level, you have a character, the hero of a story. That character wants something or needs something, but they have a problem that's standing between them and what they want. And so they meet, third, a guide who says, I've been there, done that. I can help you overcome your problem and get what you want. And then that guide gives them a plan. Step 1, step 2, step 3. It's like crossing a river, right? They say, step on this stone, step on this stone, step on this stone, and you reach the other side. And then they call them to action and they say, okay, now go complete your mission. And then if they accept that mission or they don't, think, what is it, Mission Impossible, your mission, should you choose to accept it? There has to be something at stake, something that go really right or really wrong. So think of, again, we're talking like basic action movies here. Think of someone's defusing a bomb. You find out that the bomb is a dud, suddenly there's nothing at stake anymore. There's nothing that can go wrong. And so we can use this in storytelling to say, here's what our organization helps make possible. And here's what might happen if we're not successful. So let's take a look at how we can use these 7 elements in nonprofit communication. So there's a lot of different ways to apply this, but at a really basic level, we're going to talk about what's called a mission-based brand script. So we can have brand scripts that speak to our individual stakeholder groups, like donor brand scripts, volunteer brand scripts. We can have ones for programs, but this is the one that would speak to as many of your stakeholders as possible, your clients, volunteers, donors, staff, board, everyone that engages with your organization. So the first element, the character hero. Now, this is really important. A lot of businesses get this wrong, fewer nonprofits, but it's important to remember that you are not the hero of the story. Not only are you not the hero, your volunteer isn't the hero, the donor isn't the hero. We're not the hero of the story. The people that we serve are the hero of the story. And so what we have to do is we have to identify who's the person that we serve and what is it that they want or need. And then the problem is the second part of storytelling. What are the problems that this person is facing? Now, obviously, if we're a nonprofit, we exist to solve real life problems in the world. We just have to talk about those. Now, there's 3 different levels of problems. There's the external problem, which is what people are actually facing on a day-to-day basis. There's the internal problem, which is how they feel about that problem, which is important so that we can empathize with them and understand them and develop programs around them. And then there's the philosophical problem. And this is, for a nonprofit, this is one of the most important parts of your communication. This is, blank is just plain wrong. No one should have to deal with this. It's a superlative statement that's essentially the why behind your organization. And this is sort of the rallying call for all of the other people who support your organization. And so then that's your sort of pivot point from going to talking about the character, the hero of the story and their problem, to you now as the guide. So you say, people deal with this challenge. We believe they shouldn't have to. We exist as a guide to help them overcome that challenge. And then your donors, your volunteers, your supporters can come in as co-guides alongside you. There's 2 things that a guide has to establish. That's empathy and credibility. So we mentioned the internal problem, the internal challenge people are facing. We can empathize with that by understanding them. And then, of course, we can also establish credibility in order to get people to trust us as a guide. And then we give people a plan and a clear way to get started and engage with us. That can be 3 different ways to engage, like donate, volunteer, tell a friend, or it can be linear, like for example, submit a volunteer application, complete an interview, schedule your time to volunteer. But we just want to make it as clear as possible how people can engage. And then we use the call to action element to, call them to action. Donate now, volunteer now, follow us, whatever that might be. We need to have clear calls to action. And of course, we use this in campaigns too. We can talk about all these other elements, all we want to, but at the end of the day, we have to make the ask. And then this is really important. We have the success and failure, the stakes. This is where we talk about how are people's lives changed for the better if our organization is successful or if someone supports our organization. We can also talk about the consequences that we can help people avoid if either our mission is not successful or if people don't support our mission. We have to make sure there's something at stake if people engage or don't. So if you want to go deeper on this, there's a really great book. It's called Building a Story Brand. If you want to learn more about this, I highly recommend it. I'm a StoryBrand certified guide. It changed my life when I read it. So if you want to nerd out about this, you want to use this more in your communications, definitely check out this book. So you can use this storytelling framework everywhere your organization shows up with words. That might be your website as the first place we normally apply it, your email communications, your phone calls, text messages, anywhere you're in actual one-on-one donor communications. You can use it in your thank you letters and gift acknowledgments. Think about these seven elements. And sometimes it's linear, like maybe on a website or in a fundraising letter. But sometimes think about it as the seven chords you can use to write 1,000 different songs everywhere your organization shows up with words.
Most importantly, we use this framework in campaigns. Now, let's remind ourselves of what a campaign is, because I think sometimes we get a little confused about this. A campaign in and of itself is just a series of communications. It's designed to acquire, upgrade, or further a relationship, and it usually consists of multiple appeals. So everything Christian was just talking about, text messages, phone calls, emails, newsletters, those are all appeals that are part of a greater campaign. The purpose of a campaign is threefold. Number one, to raise money. Typically, when we think about running a campaign, we're running a fundraising campaign. But we might also run a campaign to increase our social media presence for volunteers. We even run at Broadus Consulting, we run campaigns for clients to help them acquire new board members. Secondly, we want to raise awareness. If you're only running one fundraising campaign a year, you're not only missing out on an opportunity for dollars raised, but for people to learn more about your story. As Christian mentioned, we have a lot of stories as nonprofits, but we don't always get a chance to tell them. The more campaigns you run strategically, the more opportunity you have to educate your audience about all the things you do that really help to support your community. Finally, gain a response. That response could be, again, a donation mailed in or a donation made online. That response could be filling out a response card that they're interested in coming in and taking a tour of your facility. So it's really these three elements that are at play every time we run a campaign. Now, when we think about campaigns, what's crazy is that we have to really get people to engage. And Christian, I want you to talk about this because it can be kind of scary.
Yes. So in business and sales and marketing, we have a phrase that you've probably heard, which is the rule of seven, which is that you have to engage with someone in seven different ways before they make a buying decision. But like we talked about before, we live in a really noisy world, and more so every day, everyone's competing for attention. So now we have a new rule, the 7-11-4 rule. That is 7 hours of interaction across 11 different touch points at four different physical locations. So the hours, it doesn't have to be all at once. It can be 30 seconds at a time. So think reading a social media post, talking on a phone call, answering an email. We just have to engage with people in enough different ways. We're spending 7 hours with them. And 11 touch points. This can be digital or physical. This can be social media, email, your website, in person. Think about all the different places that you can show. It can be on a billboard. Think about all the different places that you show up. And then four physical locations. Now, this doesn't have to be you physically with them, but think about, someone scrolling on their phone in bed at home. Maybe they're at a coffee shop speaking with a donor development person, or you have a community engagement table at an event. They're touring your facility. Where are the different physical locations we can interact with someone? So you might be thinking, this sounds impossible. 7 hours is a lot. 11 touch points is a lot. So, Angie, if someone's thinking that it's reasonable, what would you say to them?
I would say I had the exact same experience. The first time I read that, I was the executive director at a nonprofit and also the development director, the CIO, the COO, the program director. And I just thought to myself, okay, I give up. I don't know how I'm going to get to 7 hours of interaction. But then I sat down and really looked. And if you look at this list here, you have probably most of these things already, right? So you have a website, you have social media following, you send out newsletters. If you have an event, I mean, an event typically is going to last anywhere from 1 to 3 hours. So you're already getting really close. The reality is that you're probably almost there. So just refocusing your efforts is going to make a huge difference. We talked now about what we say, right? So having something to talk about. Let's talk about who the right people are. Obviously, your current donors. As Roberta said, it is crazy that we only have a 40% retention rate because it is much easier to keep our current donors than it is to go out and find a new one. But here's your low-hanging fruit. Your existing donors, are they ready to upgrade their giving? Lapsed donors, they cared about you at one time, let's get them back in. Your board of directors, these folks should be your natural pipeline. They should be an extension of your fundraising team getting the word out there. I love to think about people who I want on my board of directors. There's nothing more powerful than calling someone and saying, we're going through a new strategic process in the changing landscape of the economy and in fundraising. I really value your opinion. Would you be willing to share 30 minutes with me to kind of checks and balance me, see if I'm thinking of this the right way and what you might do differently if you were me? People love giving their advice when approached in the appropriate way. And finally, your other centers of influence. Who are other people that could help you as you're navigating this new territory? Most importantly, look at who has given in the past. So, on average, I look at the last 5 years. Listen, if they haven't given to your organization within the last 5 years, the probability of them engaging again is relatively low. That said, I have personally had the experience where I call someone who gave 4 or 5 years ago and touch base with them. We'll walk through what that looks like in a minute. And I have them say, "Oh my gosh, I didn't even know you guys were still around. Yeah, I'd love to come meet with you." So, who has given in the past that you could potentially re engage? As you look at your file, those sustaining givers, and most often we think of sustaining givers as our monthly givers, but keep in mind they may also be quarterly, semi annual, or annual givers. Those are your most valuable relationships. The reason is that they're your most loyal donors. They've chosen to support you time and time and time again. So be thinking about who's in that category of people that you could begin to cultivate. Now, while this webinar is not focused on individual giving and a major gift standpoint, it is worth mentioning when it comes to cultivating those individual relationships, moves management is still the gold standard in major gift fundraising. This is a spreadsheet that we're going to share with you all. It's a moves management spreadsheet that I've modified myself for the different categories of things that I like to think through before I go and meet with a donor. What I would do if I were in your position, run a report of your top 30% or top 30 donors on your file. Those folks go into that first name, last name category. Be thinking about how many times they've been thanked. Do they need a stewardship touch before you ask them for anything? Remember, people need to be thanked 7 times before we ask them for another major gift. There is no exception to this rule. So if your donor hasn't been thanked 7 times, your next move with them is to find a way to reach out and thank them for their past support. We're going to skip these middle columns in the interest of time. We do have a full moves management section in our Laying a Foundation for Growth program because it is critical to the success of any nonprofit. When you think about your move with them, don't overthink this. The move may simply be, I'm going to pick up the phone and call Christian. And my intention is that I'm going to ask him if he's willing to come in and talk with me about my new strategy around individual giving to grow our organization. My minimum acceptable result is that Christian says, "No, I'm not willing to come in and meet with you right now, but you can reach back out to me in 2 weeks." So, really thinking through how you want that meeting to go with intentionality helps you get to the end result. Once you know what the result is, record it, take that information and put it into your donor management system, and then start again. So when Christian is coming in for that one-on-one meeting with me, what do I hope to accomplish in that meeting, both from his perspective and my perspective, and what's my minimum acceptable result? So now we've talked about having something to talk about, talking to the right people. Let's talk about talking to enough people. Christian?
Yeah. So the first thing that you can do is you can increase your activity on social media. Now, if you don't have a big following, if you're not posting a lot right now, don't fret. So you might be thinking, okay, I have to log into Canva, I have to hire a social media manager, create a bunch of templates, create a posting calendar, all of this. And that might work. But the good news is now more than ever, people want short, authentic content. You can literally just hold your phone up in front of your face and talk. You can record people going around your office doing different things. That's the kind of content people want to see. And another good news is too, you don't really have to pay for ads anymore because tools like Instagram Reels, YouTube Shorts, and all of the, TikTok, even all the short form video things, these days, hundreds and thousands are tiny, tiny numbers whenever it comes to impressions. You can, if I guarantee you, if you post a video today, you'll get at least 100 impressions on it. It used to be a lot, and now it's not. So start posting more maybe than you have been. It's easier than you might think.
Increase your own activity. So not just in social media, When we think about cultivating relationships with people, the whole idea here is that we let our donors know that we care about them, that we care about them as people, and that we see them and we appreciate them. So here are three easy things to do. Number one, send one handwritten note every week for the rest of the year to a donor or prospective donor. It doesn't even have to be about your mission. It could just be something as simple as, hey, Christian, I hope you and your wife really enjoyed that hike you went on this weekend. Thanks so much for being our partner. Appreciate you. Something very simple and quick that goes out. What a nice, nice note to receive in the mail. Secondly, call 5 donors a week. Call them with the intention of setting one visit. Not everyone is going to be able to or will want to meet with you, but just the effort of reaching out and inviting them, that's a lot of goodwill that you're building. And number three, which is just a take on number two, is have one donor visit a month. If you're already having donor visits, have one more donor visit every month.
Yeah, you can also run one extra campaign this year. And like a lot of these things, you can do this in a really complicated way that takes a lot of planning and a lot of energy, or you can do it in a really simple way. So a campaign can actually be as simple as just one email. So I love telling this story. We had a client at the end of last year who wasn't going to run an end of year campaign. And so we came into the last minute and said, okay, can you please just send one email? We'll write it for you. We wrote them one email in maybe an hour. They raised $20,000 with that one email. No strategy, no planning, no follow-up, none of the typical elements of a campaign, but they raised $20,000 with this one email when they wouldn't have normally run a campaign. And then Angela and I had, in the Laying a Foundation for Growth program, we had one client who invested 5 figures in the program and made back their entire investment just by running one extra campaign. So take that storytelling framework that we talked about earlier, and you can just replicate that framework over and over and over again. Just choose a story to tell and tell it on multiple platforms.
Lastly, engage your board. That same exercise that I just talked about of your top 30% or 30 donors in your moves management pipeline, sit down with every board member and work with them to identify 5 people within their circle of influence that they could start moving through that moves management process. Remember, the intention isn't that your board member introduces you to his colleague and you ask him for money on the first meeting. The point is that you get the introduction, you're able to sit down with that person and get to know them, understand what they already give to, what's important to them, see if you're a fit. From there, you're going to plan each of those moves. That's the reason it's called moves management. A major gift is comprised of many, many moves. They're different for everyone, but with intentionality, we can really start to add more people to our donor base. So think of it this way. If you have 10 board members and each of them identifies 5 people that you can begin cultivating, that's 50 new prospective donors that can come onto your file in a very short period of time. What's fascinating is that if we do this, so let's just take the rest of the year. If you write one note a week for the rest of the year, that's 40 handwritten notes that have gone out. Pretty great. It's 1,000 phone calls. It sounds crazy, but if you multiply out 5 calls for the rest of the week, you can reach 1,000 people. That means if you only have 500 people on your donor database, you can reach out to them a couple of different times. You can also have 10 additional donor meetings this year still. There is still time for March to get one donor meeting in before the end of the month. On a mass scale, when we're talking about raising brand awareness and acquiring new donors, you're really just increasing your brand. Running campaigns, that is critical to increasing your brand awareness and reaching out to people one-on-one. They're going to tell other people when they have a great experience with you. You're deepening your relationship with your best donors, which again, we want to keep those people rather than having to go and get so many new people. And finally, you're engaging your board in fundraising. I feel like so many boards have moved to this point where when I talk to board members, they say, I feel like I show up to these board meetings and it's really just a report of what's going on. I don't know where my place is. This process gives them a place to help support you and to be an extension of you. Now, some of my favorite resources. So create a new revenue stream. This is one of the resources we have available in the Laying a Foundation for Growth platform. We are making this available free download for you. It helps you walk through everything you need to think through in order to come up with a new revenue stream for your organization. So that could be a campaign. It could be an actual, we're going to partner with donatestock.com and start accepting stock gifts and really promoting that in our campaigns. The moves management spreadsheet template, I get that it's just a spreadsheet, but it does have all the columns in there that will help you think through each of those next steps. And then finally, that 99 content, ideas for social. So for me, I love raising money. I've always been good at raising assets. I am not a creative person. So I love resources like this where people who are creative, like Christian and the Solace Media team, come up with this because then I look at those 99 ideas and I'm like, oh yeah, I can do that. I'm making this way too complicated. So we have all of those available for you today in free downloads.
Wow, what a wealth of information. I know if you're like me, your mind is exploding. I already saw somebody asked if we will send out the slide deck. We can definitely send that out. I will be sending out some resources today from the webinar that we promised, and later on this week, we'll get you the recording. And I just love that Christian and Angela just give so many tangible practical things you can implement, right? To make it easy. And so it's simple. It's not easy, but it's simple, meaning it is hard work, but we can do it and you can do it. And we're here to help you. So thank you for everyone who completed the survey. We will get to Q&A. I know it is 30 minutes after, so if you need to hop off, that's fine. If you want to stay on for some live questions, that's great. But I'm going to announce our winner for the Amazon gift card. And I apologize if I say this wrong, but it's Erin Bergeen. I don't know if I said that right, from Empowered Tutoring. And so congratulations. And we will be, I'll have Carrie reach out to you. We will get you your gift card emailed to you. Thank you to everyone who filled that out. So if you have a question, feel free to drop it in that Q&A button and we can stay on for a few more minutes and ask Christian and Angela all our fundraising and marketing questions to help increase giving. So, okay, all right. Our first question um, says, I'm new to fundraising and mostly work with grants or major gifts from foundations. How can these principles for individual giving still apply to me?
Christian, I want you to talk about that a little bit, but I just want to say anecdotally, what's fascinating is that when you really start implementing the structure, it is targeted at individual givers. Remember that individuals run corporations, they run foundations, we're still dealing with people at the end of the day. And what's fascinating is that we see all of that revenue grow and expand once this framework is implemented. Christian, you want to talk about that a little bit?
Oh, great question. Okay, storytelling, storytelling, storytelling. I was just working last week on with an organization I volunteer with that wrote a grant application, and it was a whole lot of gobbledygook. Grants. It's easy because honestly, the grant application language is so often so dense. It's tempting to reflect that, and especially because it often is very technical, right? There's a lot of numbers and data involved with that. But it's really important to use the principles of storytelling we talked about. It can still be interesting to read, and I think that if you write with clarity and write in a compelling way, you can stand out way more than we realize on grant applications. So what I did in the grant application I was just working on last week was just made sure to tie it back. I spent a ton of time researching the organization who was giving the grant and understanding their goals in distributing the funds and using the story brand framework we talked about to discuss how they're the hero of the story, they have goals, and supporting this project is going to help them reach their goals. So you can use these storytelling elements in any type of fundraising.
Wow, that is so helpful. I think we try to overcomplicate things. And so I love that the story brand framework really helps us make it simple. And Christian, I liked how you research the organization who's providing the grant. And I think that's where storytelling is really important, that you are knowing your donors. And I know when we do the messaging package at Solace Media, we start with surveys to find out what do the donors value? What is the language that resonates with them? And then that's what we want to simplify and get more of out there. So very helpful. Thank you, Angela and Christian. So our next question, I think I ended up right here. It said, here it is. I would love to hear more about the comment. I thought I heard of organizations doing the Lang Foundation for Growth, doubling income in 1 year. Is that what they heard correctly? And specifically, how many organizations does this represent? What size, what year? So just a little more concrete data around those statistics.
Yep. So I developed Link Foundation for Growth launched in 2022. So it's not that old. Keep in mind that when we're measuring that time frame, right, double their revenue in 1 year, it's 1 year after they finish the program, which is 6 months. So we essentially have to wait 18 months once clients come onto our file to measure that. We've had 9 organizations so far go through laying a foundation for growth. Not everyone has implemented the development plan. And here, this is something I want everyone to hear loud and clear. If we go through the entire laying a foundation for growth program and you do not implement your development plan, you don't do anything differently, you will not raise more money. I just want to be very, very clear about that. So for organizations that have implemented the development plan, 4 of them who are outside of that 18-month time frame now did implement their development plan. They all doubled their revenue in their first year, and then some even increased by 20%. Actually, everyone increased by 20% in years following. So really just looking at that structure. We've had a couple that did not implement anything from the development plan, and they did not raise more money because we have to do the work. If you hear me say it one time, you'll hear me say it 1,000 times. There is no substitute for the work. And we have 2 clients that just finished the program, so there's nothing to measure just yet. So does
Very
that answer the
helpful.
question?
Yeah, and Angela, to clarify too, the statistics that we gave were for the full Langa Foundation for Growth program.
Correct.
The
Yep.
comprehensive one, that's a lot more one-on-one time with Angela, a lot more coaching. She
Yep.
will be there with you. Christian's there crafting your story.
Yep.
This other package is a shorter, not as hands-on, but you still have a lot of the resources that were.
Exactly. Yep.
So
So
if anybody,
full foundation for growth, you meet with me every other week. You have access to, of course, the online course. Plus, you're going to get all new branding and messaging. So you'll work with Christian to develop at least 2 brand scripts. We work through customer journeys. If you need new branding, certainly that's something that Solace Media can work with you on as well. And then on my side of the fence, you get a full nonprofit assessment and a very comprehensive development plan. Whereas in the program that we talked about today, Laying a Foundation Your Way, I gotten a lot of feedback from people like, I don't have time for this. Like, I don't have time to meet with you every other week and to go through all of these different things. I just need something right now to help me. So that's what Laying a Foundation Your Way is really designed for.
that's really helpful. And I'm going to skip to a question that was just asked because it follows up on this one. And someone wanted to know what were the sizes of these organizations? Is there an ideal size? Well, they asked specifically for the 4 that you mentioned.
Yeah.
I think this is a good time to just talk about
Yeah.
what's the ideal size of organization that these packages would be good
Mhm.
for.
So the first one that I ever did in laying a foundation with the framework before we actually even had the full program was Soliana Stables. And they were raising $50,000 when I first started working with them. In their first year, they raised over $150,000. They raise on average about $500,000 right now, and that started in 2018. So they've increased giving every single year since 2018. And those first 2 years, they had 100% growth, and then about 20% growth after that. Raise Up Families, I implemented that there since I was the executive director. I hired Solace Media to help me with the website and the branding. Took that organization from 450,000 the year that I came on board to 1.2 million just 2 years later, and they've consistently stayed in that area. Casa de Esperanza de los Niños, they're not out of their full year yet, but they raised 50% more in their first 10 months out of the program than they did in the prior year. And then Noah's House was doing about 200,000 when I first started working with them and laying a foundation for growth. And now they do about 450 or 500. Same thing, first year, huge growth, second year, about 20% growth. I would say, oh, I forgot to mention, so Casa, their budget is about 2 million. So they did 2 million and then 3.5 in their first year after that. So, or their first 10 months. So we're waiting until the end of this year to be able to say what their ultimate results were. For this program, I really think budgets between 500,000 and 5 million of what you're trying to raise is ideal. Anytime you reach a fundraising plateau, that's a really good time to look at this program.
Very helpful. I love how the program can really work for such a wide range of nonprofits and that it builds every year, right? So I think we
Correct.
not only look at that you're making your investment back in a year, but then it's continuing to build.
It's a huge investment. So when I write development plans, they're custom for every client. I mean, literally no 2 development plans are the same because no opportunities are the same for every organization. So it takes a while, but when we look at it, we want that development plan to last you for at least 5 years. You should be able to work that plan. Once it's in place, you get it working for you for about 5 years. And then from there, you will have grown enough that it's time to take a look and say, okay, how do we go even further?
Very grateful. Thank you. Someone asked, will we send it out live? Yes, I will send out the recording by the end of this week. I'll send out the resources. Jared asks us a really good question on offering options to our donors. He says, do you recommend offering donors a comprehensive menu of giving options? Not only top priorities you've budgeted to tackle this year, which of course you can highlight, but other giving opportunities that are lower down and still a priority on things that you spend.
So remember that when we're raising money from people, we don't like choices. In general, we as humans, we don't like choices. We want to be asked for something very specific because, as Christian talked about, when we have choices, it causes our brain to work. And we have a tendency to be like, oh, I'll think about that and come back. We still want to have to work that hard. So, what I always recommend, and this is part of what we always look at when we're in the Folding a Foundation for Growth program, as part of our assessment and then the development plan, what are the specific asks we want to make? Really focusing in on what does the organization need. Remember, you're the expert in what you need for your organization. Your donor is not. Choices have a tendency to reduce your overall financial commitment that you'll get back from people. Jared, I don't know if that answers your question or not.
Okay. Thank you. Very helpful. So another question, it says, if you have fixed costs of director level and ED salaries, 400,000 in total, that each have budgets that are consistent every year and none get everything they want budgeted each year, wouldn't getting one or more of these positions endowed, like university, like this is long. Sorry, my scroll thing, because this is posted
That's
in
okay.
a chat. I'm like, I lost it. Did you
Let's
see the
see.
question? It was in the
I
chat.
did endowed, like university professorship's a good idea. Yes, if possible. And I think for some organizations that definitely is possible. It comes down to your donor. So what's fascinating is that like one of my life's aspirations is to be able to make so much money that I can just endow operating expenses at some specific organizations because I know from this work. And this always kills me too, right? Like corporations and foundations, they only want to give to specific programs. They don't want to give to general operating. They don't want to give to salaries. Who do they think is doing the work? This part always just blows my mind. So if you have specific donors or a pool of donors who understand and appreciate that you need people in these specific roles in order for your organization to be successful, by all means, create an endowment for that. I think it's a fantastic way for foundations love to see that. They want to know that your general operating, that your most important parts of your program are already taken care of. Again, fascinating. They don't want to help you take care of them, but they want them to be there to be taken care of. But if you do have donors that are really open to that, I think that's a really great way to go.
Very, very helpful. Someone asked back to the question on the size is, can this program work for a smaller scaling nonprofit that has an opportunity to budget under 300,000?
Yes, 100%. Like I said, we started, Soliana Stable started at 50,000. Noah's House started at 200,000. It's the best part of this is that the framework is the same no matter what size your organization is. I think the challenge is it's trying to figure out what do I need to organize. So we actually start with data. And I am not a data person inherently. You have to become really good with data in order to advance the relationship with your donors. So we start with that. We talk about telling your story. We talk about revenue streams and cultivating donors and stewardship and all kinds of different information. Actually, if you scan that QR code and you go to the landing page for Laying a Foundation Your Way, you can see all of the different categories of curriculum. And there's even a sample video in every single category so you can see what's covered there. We talk about engaging your board, acquiring new donors. So I think the hard part is really figuring out that special formula of what it takes to grow an individual program. And y'all are busy doing your jobs. So this has been my quest over the last 3 years to figure out, okay, what are the key pieces that we all need? What order do we need to layer them into? how do we engage our board and our other supporters in this endeavor and make it as seamless for you all as possible? So that's really what it's all about. If you're doing less than 300,000, every single principle in there is going to apply to you.
Very helpful. Thank you.
Mhm.
Here comes a question from Amber. She says, thanks for all the information. I'm a part of a national organization that has offices in 5 different states. And at the end of the day, all donations go to the national pot, but our individual states to have individual goals and standards to meet as we each carry out programming in our respective states. Do you have any insight on how to approach donors when in this model? And do I focus more on what an organization is doing on the national scale or locally?
That's a really good question. We just finished work with a national nonprofit, the Reading League. They have a kind of a similar model, only their chapters do get to keep money as they fundraise as well. So they have kind of a split model. I think that's more of a one-off conversation I'd be happy to have with you if you want to schedule some time on my calendar. It really just depends on how you tell the story. I think for a lot of people, that local message works really well. So you can take your larger message and synthesize it down into each individual state. For some people, they're okay with being talked about on a national scale. And the way I think about this, and Christian, you will probably have some opinions on it too. So if you look at different organizations, so I worked for 7 years for Mercy Home for Boys and Girls. They only have services in Chicago, Illinois, 2 campuses in Chicago. 75% of their donors are located outside the state of Illinois. So it kind of depends on your marketing message. But then you look at the flip side at an organization like St. Jude, right? They're national, but they're only in Tennessee. So I really think it depends on the message and if the message that you have resonates with everyone, regardless of where you live, or if you need to tailor that message a little bit. Christian, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking the same thing. I would say it's easy for us to sit here and make assumptions, but I would say just ask your audience, and maybe not ask directly, but talk to the people who talk to them, and see what resonates with them. You can segment your message if you need to, because it honestly might be helpful, like Angie said, to understand different types of donors' motivations. But at the end of the day, I would just say whatever's the clearest is probably going to be best. So typically, I've worked with a few organizations like that where we end up just saving that as like kind of almost like an FAQ point, like how does this funding work? Because at the end of the day, people want to support the work, and we just want to create the shortest pathway to getting them to understand how they can support that work as possible. So we don't want to overcomplicate it, but it is important to understand your donors' motivations.
Mm. Yes, that qualitative research. I like the conversations that can run that. Very helpful. Okay, we're going to have time for one more question on the webinar, but we're going to send out some links. And if you want to set up a consultation with Angela, we'll have all that sent out to you and the resources. But this is a really good one from Michael. He says, any input for leaders who do not have any development staff and have to run everything themselves with help from assistants?
Yeah, Michael, I hear you. I've been there, done that. It's really hard. So the here's my best piece of advice is to get organized. One of the things in laying a foundation your way is I mean, the videos in there are really short because you don't have a ton of time. The biggest thing is to get organized into back plan. So if you want to run a campaign, I mean, I use again an Excel spreadsheet because it's the easiest, cheapest, simplest way for me to look at something. If I say, okay, I want my year-end campaign to launch on October the 24th or that week, right? Then I think to myself, okay, if I want my first letter for that campaign to go out the week of the 24th, I need to back plan and have it at the printer 2 weeks before that. I need to have it at the graphic designer if I'm using graphic design 2 weeks before that. I need to, start thinking about my story 4 weeks before that. And then I need to engage, program or whatever it is. That to me, taking an hour or 2 hours in the course of a week to sit down and say, what do I want to do? When do I have to start each of these different things that goes with this in order to accomplish it? That to me is the biggest time saver and makes all of the work palatable. So when you have that spreadsheet, then okay, so it's the week of June 6th. All I need to do this week is think about which stories I want to tell at the end of the year. And then the next week, all I need to do this week is to engage my program and figure out, who from program is going to help me secure these stories, get story consent, all that kind of stuff. It just breaks the work out into a couple hours, maybe a week, and then you can get to all of the elements that you want. And then do that for every single revenue stream that you want to work on.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Angela and Christian, for your expertise. Very helpful. Thank you, everybody, for your time and attending today. We would love to stay connected. I will send out the resources, and we are here for any questions you have in the future. Thank you for what you do. We realize that what you do is not easy, but you are making a difference. So thank you for what you do, and stay tuned next month. We haven't released it yet. I don't have a slide for it, but you're the first to know. Our webinar next month will actually be on technology and how it can be your friend as a nonprofit and how you can get all your technology to talk together. We have a very, very talented and accomplished presenter next month. So stay tuned for your email for that announcement. Have a good one.